Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on the issues. You're listening to Out Front with Samuel Culper.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Out Front. I'm your host, Samuel Culper. This is the first episode of the new year. It is the first episode actually in a long time, I think since last month probably, but early last month. But I'm here with an important message today, because today I'm going to talk about how the fourth industrial revolution is going to affect our low-intensity conflict. Now let's start from the very beginning. There's a dude named Klaus Schwab. He is the founder and the executive director of the World Economic Forum. And he made headlines last summer when he started talking about the Great Reset, which he says will rewrite the framework of the economy, of society, geopolitics, the environment, and technology around the world. And that is going to be the focus on the World Economic Forum conference, which is going to be held later this month. Now, I've been getting spun up on the Great Reset. I read 2 of Klaus Schwab's books on the Fourth Industrial Revolution over the Christmas break. I just published a special report on the Great Reset for Forward Observer subscribers. I did that last week. And it is going to, the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Great Reset are going to impact the United States and also our domestic conflict. And in some ways, it could actually accelerate, in one way at least, it will actually accelerate low-intensity conflict, and it could become a higher intensity. I'll tell you why in this episode. Now, each year, I spend numerous hours watching the World Economic Forum. Sometimes they have live streams. I'll go back and read some of the transcripts sometimes they become available. And reading firsthand accounts of these presentations and panel discussions that happen. What we have is the world's financial elite who are sharing their expectations of the future. And then I take what's pertinent, I report it for Forward Observer subscribers. I'll do the same this year. If you want to support my mission, you can do that at forwardobserver.com/subscribe. We certainly would appreciate your support. Now, as I mentioned, over Christmas break, I got caught up on 2 of Schwab's books. The first is called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the second is called Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Schwab he breaks down these industrial revolutions. He says the first industrial revolution happened in textiles, which led to the replacement of human labor with machines. And you may have heard of the Luddite movement. That's when this guy named Ned Ludd was out of a job. And it wasn't just the textile workers, because the machines replaced many of these textile jobs. And it made a bunch of people angry. And so Ned Ludd started this movement. These people called themselves the Luddite. It led to armed conflict in Great Britain for about 5 years. And, basically it spurred militia activity, and government forces were called in. Of course, there were protests and armed protesters. What typically happens is after every industrial revolution, they tend to be disruptive, and they sometimes lead to conflict. So that was the first industrial revolution, happened in textiles. Human labor was replaced with machines. The second industrial revolution included electricity and sanitation. That led to longer human lifespans and generally higher quality of life. There was the third industrial revolution, which included microchips and computer processing. And then there's the fourth industrial revolution, which is going on right now, which includes artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, in short, Klaus Schwab is concerned that these technological advancements are going to lead to further income and wealth inequality, and he wants to ensure that the technological benefits and wealth creation are distributed equally. That is one of the main points of the Great Reset, is wealth redistribution being necessary. These are his words, not mine, or his concept, not mine. Now, the underlying problem here is that the technology and its effects of the fourth industrial revolution will be disruptive. And he says that is going to lead to conflict, hence the need for elites and society to shape the fourth industrial revolution. This is what he wants to do to prevent further conflict. Now, this brings us to, of course, low-intensity conflict. Some of us woke up on Christmas morning and checked the news to discover the news of that bombing in Nashville. Now, investigators apparently are still looking into this. The last thing I heard is that there was some speculation and maybe some evidence that the Nashville bomber attacked an AT&T building to protest or maybe out of fear or anger about 5G communication networks. There's tons of conspiracy theories and maybe even some legitimate concerns about 5G. I think some of those concerns probably are legitimate. And so this apparently angered this individual. He goes out and he bombs the AT&T building. Now, Schwab in his books and in his Great Reset book specifically, talk about this kind of oppositional violence. What we're going to have is technological advancement in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics, and that's going to displace millions of jobs, and it's also going to drive fear and unrest. And this is going to manifest itself in an expansion of low-intensity conflict, this anger towards technology. They're taking jobs. It's going to cause fear, as I'll cover near the end of the show here. So let's look at this. Let's look at low-intensity conflict. I try to understand low-intensity conflict among three structural fault lines, or maybe three planes of conflict. You have political, social, and economic. And where those places overlap, like the political and the social and economic, so on and so forth, we find specific types of low-intensity conflict. So for one is the culture war that plays out between political and social. And then we have class war that plays out between social and economic. And what happens, and then we have intra-elite conflict between the political and economic layers. But where all this overlaps in the center, that's where low-intensity conflict happens, on the political, social, and economic planes. And what happens is you'll have a development in the political sphere or the economic sphere, or the social sphere, and it ends up affecting the other spheres. So you can't just, basically we have to, this is kind of like, systems thinking. We have to understand the political, social, and economic planes and what's going on there so that we can properly understand and anticipate the future of low-intensity conflict. That's what we do at Forward Observer, and that's what we offer to our subscribers, is what happens at the intersection in that low-intensity conflict. Now, I haven't made up my mind. Technology, Fourth Industrial Revolution, it's going to, I think, massively reshape the landscape of this country. It may even threaten the existence of this country, frankly. And I haven't made my mind up if technology is a fourth plane or if it's merely an accelerator. And really, I'm kind of leaning towards that it accelerates it accelerates activity in the structural fault lines as opposed to it being a fourth plane. But I am certain that technology will drive low-intensity conflict. Here are three reasons why. I wrote about this last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago. Number one, technological advancements are expected to displace millions of American workers. And depending on who you ask, that number is somewhere between 10% and 50% of all U.S. jobs in the next 20 years. And it's not just going to be blue-collar jobs or low-skill workers. It is also going to affect white-collar industries, things like positions like accounting and attorneys, and not all of them, but there will be artificial intelligence that can do the work of multiple accountants. They can do the work of multiple attorneys, not 100% of the work. But, if you have let's say you have an accounting firm of 50 accountants. Well, you know what? In the future, you may be able to have an accounting firm of 10 accountants and 40 machines, basically, let's just say, doing the work of all those 50 accounts. And so it's going to create massive job loss in white-collar industries as well. As a matter of fact, it was last year's World Economic Forum where they talked about this, the coming the coming wave of white-collar job losses due to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics and other forms of automation. Now, the problem with this technology is, for us, for the country, for these people who are going to lose their jobs, is that because of the rapid scalability of these technologies, job losses are likely to accrue at much faster rates than jobs being created. Now, I hear a lot of people, they come out and they say, oh, but Sam, yeah, artificial intelligence, it is going to create a lot of job losses, but it's also going to create lots of new jobs. And yes, that certainly will be the case. It will create jobs. The problem is the jobs it will destroy will be at much higher volumes and faster than the jobs they will create. And so I think we are going to have a period where you're going to have this large chasm in employment. And, eventually maybe that'll catch up. I've talked a lot about my expectation that we are going to have universal health care. We are going to have universal basic income in this country. And one of the main reasons behind that, one of the main drivers behind that is job loss due to artificial intelligence. And that's already happening. It's going to continue to happen next 5, 10, 20 years. And we may have a completely different economy in 20 years than we have today because of these advances in technology. Now, this is, of course, going to result in persistent, widespread joblessness. This is going to lead to heightened levels of class conflict. And we're already seeing this. Capitalism versus socialism. That was a kind of a nascent trend back during the previous Marxist administration. But that is going to come to dominate socioeconomic conflict this decade. Ray Dalio has been talking about this since 2017, this coming conflict between capitalists and socialists in this country. And job loss is one of the reasons why he anticipates that. Now, the second way that the fourth industrial revolution is going to affect our low-intensity conflict is that there is likely to be an expansion of the culture war as well. What we're going to have, we're already seeing this today with CRISPR, these gene editing, gene splicing tools where you can basically make your little Ken and Barbie doll babies. We're going to have these biotechnologies and neurotechnologies, human-machine systems, augmented reality, and a number of other advancements. And they're going to assault traditional moral beliefs and pose new ethical questions. Just because we can do this does not mean that we should do this. Are we playing God when we go in and edit DNA and we remove a gene of disease, or we remove, or maybe, we monitor the DNA for some fetal clump of cells, as I think that's the terminology they like to use. And we're going to see, oh, this baby is going to be born with this condition. Well, let's go in and edit the DNA. Or, hey, this baby, it has, markers of, I don't know how this stuff works exactly, but, maybe this baby carries a gene that we understand to cause cancer later in life. Well, are we going to go in there and just, cut that thing out and resplice the DNA and let this thing be born and, live to 200 one day, or maybe older? Actually, it's funny. A few years ago, I read some futurists talking about the first modern human being to live to 150 years old is probably alive today due to modern medicine and technological advancements over the next, let's say 50 years or so, which is a pretty fascinating thought. One of my concerns, obviously, is that this technology is and these procedures are so expensive. What if, and this really has to do with kind of neo-feudalism. That's a big thing I'm going to be talking about, later this month or maybe next month. There's a great book by Joel Kotkin called The Coming of Neo-Feudalism. And, what if it's only the wealthy who get access to these procedures? So the wealthy ensure that their children are born healthier and live longer lives, and everyone else, they're still dying from cancer and, all these diseases that are killing people today. And you kind of get this class of super elite people. Now, that may have been science fiction, 20 to 50 years ago. Today, it very well could be a reality in the next 20 to 50 years. So at any rate, the problem that I foresee happening is you are going to have these new technologies that are going to be considered immoral by a great many people. And as we saw with abortion clinic bombings and the killings of abortionists in the 1990s, and I think that may have even went back as far as 1970s, 1980s, but that type of violence, are we going to see similar attacks against the people and companies that are developing what will be perceived by many to be unconscionable technologies in the future? Now, other than 2018's YouTube shooting, the Nashville bombing is the only other technology-related attack that I can recall. Now, granted, maybe there have been some technology-related attacks, or some attacks against tech companies or tech founders who have started this stuff. If that is the case, I haven't seen it. But I think technology-related terrorism could become not uncommon this decade. It may become as common as attacks against abortion providers that we saw just a few decades ago. Now, the third way that the fourth industrial revolution is going to affect low-intensity conflict is we've already seen, I've documented this numerous times, we've seen elements of the far left and the far right express a desire to engage in cyber warfare against the government and other targets. You have these radical and extremist groups that are publicly advocating for the development of cyber capabilities being a strategic imperative for their revolutionary aims. Basically, you have these people saying, we have to take our demonstrations or our protests or our physical attacks into the digital and cyber realm, and we have to be a multi-dimensional. This has to be a multi-dimensional revolution, right? The Army, talks about multi-domain conflict, using ground troops and air, land, sea, cyberspace, multi-domain conflict. And we see these far left and far right groups kind of talking about, at least dual domain in the physical realm and on the ground and now in cyber. So at any rate, I think that's very fascinating because here's the deal. The fourth industrial revolution is bringing us the Internet of Things. And this is where toasters and washing machines and refrigerators and everything, they're all connected to the internet. We're going to have more devices and more appliances, more facilities, more systems are going to be internet facing, connected to the internet this decade. And what that does is it expands the surface area for cyber exploitation. And so that's maybe a good sign that cyber exploitation is going to increase. So there is the possibility that in addition to nation states and criminals wielding these kinds of cyber capabilities, we're going to see domestic activists and revolutionaries carrying out disruptive cyber attacks as a part of this low-intensity conflict. And by the way, this stuff is not going to be limited to attacking government. It's very likely to, these attacks are very likely to target commercial entities and critical infrastructure as well. Now, I made this first list of the first three things off the top of my head, but I want to add one more to this. And it's off some reporting we did back in about a month ago, actually just about 3 weeks ago. Last month, in December 2020, the Department of the Army released a strategy that warned about how foreign adversaries are going to target Army installations, especially inside the continental United States. As a matter of fact, it came out in the early warning brief on 16 December. Again, if you want to get my daily briefs, you can get my intel briefs at forwardobserver.com/subscribe. Now, this guide pointed out a previous national defense strategy document that pointed out, quote, the homeland is no longer a sanctuary, end quote. And the report warned that foreign adversaries are going to target Army facilities and critical infrastructure, along with soft targets like the family members of personnel, of Army military personnel. They said they're going to use conventional and unconventional means, and that means cyber attacks, protests, and criminal activity. And as I was reading through this portion, I noted that this sounds a lot like the Army is preparing for domestic hybrid warfare, or a scenario where the homeland becomes contested space due to foreign conventional or unconventional means. And they actually use the term contested. They talk in the strategy report, the Army actually says in essence, get ready to operate in a contested environment here in the homeland, here domestically in the continental United States. Now, it's in that context that I add the fourth way that the Industrial Revolution could worsen our low-intensity conflict. So number 4 is foreign adversaries like China and Russia have developed very sophisticated information operations and hybrid warfare strategies that are designed to foment unrest and complicate domestic security efforts. Foreign powers. I get this question a lot. Is there any foreign influence, like back during what I call Floyd's Rebellion, the summer of 2020? Is there any external support or any foreign assistance to these groups? And the short answer is I don't know for a fact. But foreign powers may already be providing, or they could provide in the future, direct or indirect support to criminal groups, protest organizations, and radical extremist and revolutionary movements here in the U.S. Hybrid warfare tactics, stuff like this, are commonly seen in other parts of the world. One reason why China or Russia would pursue this strategy is because this type of support is unlikely to cross the threshold of conventional war, but it's still going to exploit existing political, social, and economic vulnerabilities in the United States. This is a target of opportunity that probably can't be passed up. Now, according to the Army, this is a baseline scenario. The Department of the Army came out and basically told officials, get ready to operate in a contested environment here domestically. So those are the 4 ways that the Fourth Industrial Revolution are going to complicate a response to low-intensity conflict. These are the ways that the low-intensity conflict could develop into something far worse in the future. And that's the brunt of today's show. Now, I will end today's show with 2 final points. Number 1, all this stuff, this is the type of information that we cover in my early morning intel brief. So I invite you to try us out free for 7 days and get a free 7-day trial, forwardobserver.com/subscribe. If you don't find value in the report, then you can cancel it anytime within 7 days. You won't be charged, completely free for 7 days. Now, the second thing that I want to point out is starting this month, I'll be resuming my intelligence and security training courses. I canceled all last year's courses due to the Chinese coronavirus. Now more than ever, it's important to learn the skills and concepts required to navigate this future instability. Just because Trump got elected doesn't mean this stuff's over. I mean, this stuff is going to continue for well into this decade. I will be hosting tactical intelligence courses in 10 states this year. You can sign up to receive additional information about these courses. I'm just about to publish my training schedule, at least the first few months of 2021. You can sign up for more information at forwardobserver.com/grayzone. And so at any rate, we're going to we have a training course coming up this weekend in Bryan, Texas. It is the Close Target Reconnaissance course, and I'm really looking forward to it. We got a couple pipe hitters coming in to teach this course for us. And so once we get done with that, we'll have some reviews, and we'll probably run this course again, do an open enrollment for this course later in the year. So if you want more information, forwardobserver.com/grayzone. All right, well, that does it for today's report. For today's edition of Outfront. I appreciate you listening. I'm going to get back on the saddle here and do this show once a week, every Monday, Outfront. So if you like this show, if you like the stuff I talk about, things I cover, if you think it's interesting, share it with your friends and family. And maybe it will change their perspective on what's going to happen in the future. Maybe they will become more interested in general preparedness. Maybe they'll be highly motivated to get better prepared for what's coming. Share this with friends. Also, this is going on iTunes and all the other podcast places. So if you think I deserve a 5-star rating and review, please leave one. It's also going up on the YouTube channel. So if you like this kind of stuff, please like and subscribe to get more of it. And that really does it for today's episode. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, be well and stay out front.
Like a put. And I'm not bragging. It's just that I didn't believe in Santa Claus at 2.5, and nobody had to tell me.